Do you believe you know the history of Rome? Caesar, Augustus, Trajan, names that seem eternal. But what no one tells you is that behind the marble statues, there were men of flesh and blood, warriors who defied the impossible, changed the course of the empire, and yet were erased from memory. Today you will discover the hidden truth. 10 forgotten generals who saved Rome but were betrayed by ingratitude and condemned to the silence of history. Get ready, because in the next few minutes you won't just hear facts. You'll witness battles lost in time, decisions that prevented the collapse of the ancient world, and endings so tragic they seem like legends. And who opens this list is a man who almost rebuilt the entire Roman Empire. But he ended up begging in the streets of Constantinople. Before we continue, I want to ask you something simple. If this introduction has already made you realize that the story you were told about Rome is incomplete, leave your like and subscribe to the channel right now. This way you strengthen this project and, in return, you always receive revealing content that most will never know. Together, we will rescue memories that Rome tried to erase and transform the way you see history. Born in 505 AD in the province of Thrace, Flavius Belisarius did not come from a noble birth, but carried in his eyes the firmness of one who saw beyond his time. He started out as a simple bodyguard for Emperor Justinian, but it didn't take long for him to prove that his mind wasn't just made to wield a sword. Belisarius thought of war as a large chessboard where strategy was worth more than brute force. While the Eastern Roman Empire struggled not to collapse as had already happened in the West, it dared to propose the unthinkable, to reconquer Rome's lost territories. He created a mobile and versatile army, combining the discipline of infantry with the strength of heavy cavalry and still adapting barbarian tactics according to the enemy. In 530, even at a disadvantage, he defeated the Sassanid Persians at Dara with improvised fortifications and surgical counterattacks. A few years later, with only 15,000 men, he landed in North Africa and destroyed the power of the Vandals, retaking Carthage and restoring the Roman luster to the Mediterranean. After restoring Carthage, Belisarius was sent against the Ostrogoths in Italy. With few resources and sabotage from within the empire itself, he conquered cities, won battles, and seemed destined to restore Rome to its lost greatness. But Roman ingratitude was repeated. Justinian, the same emperor who had benefited from his victories, began to fear his popularity. Accused of conspiracy, Belisarius was arrested, humiliated, and silenced. Some accounts claim that he died blind, begging on the streets of Constantinople, a tragic end for the one who nearly rebuilt the Roman Empire. His story is a brutal reminder. In Rome, the greatest heroes often received not statues, but chains. And while Belisarius was forgotten, another name emerged in the West. A man who would face none other than Attila, the scourge of God, and become the last great defender of the Western Roman Empire. That man was Flavio Aetius. Born at the end of the 4th century in an already weakened and decaying Rome, Flavius Aetius seemed doomed to grow up in the midst of chaos. But his youth gave him an unusual advantage. He spent years as a diplomatic hostage among the Huns, learning directly from the most feared enemy of his generation, Attila. There he absorbed tactics, strategies, and the mentality of a people that seemed invincible. This experience, which could have been his undoing, became his greatest weapon. Decades later, when Attila marched his devastating army toward Gaul, the Western Roman Empire was already on the verge of collapse. Empty coffers, reduced legions, and unstable borders. It was time for Aetius to act. Without resources, he did the impossible. He gathered a mosaic of peoples who had previously been enemies of Rome, Visigoths, Burgundians, Franks, and Alans, and molded them into an unlikely alliance. On the horizon, the battle that would decide the future of Europe was approaching. In the year 451 AD, the forces met in the Catalonian fields. On one side, Attila, the scourge of God, leading feared hordes of Huns throughout Europe. On the other, Flavio Accio, commanding an unlikely coalition of peoples who until recently were mortal enemies. The shock was brutal. The plain turned into a sea of spears, screams, and blood. For a moment it seemed that Rome would fall definitively, but Aetius's leadership held back Attila's advance. Many historians consider this to be the exact moment when Western Europe was saved from an irreversible invasion. But as so often, Rome paid for its greatest deeds with ingratitude. Aetius accumulated power and prestige, and this bothered the fragile Emperor Valentinian III. In 454, inside his own palace, Valentinian murdered Aetius with his own hands. A councillor present muttered a bitter phrase, "You have just cut off your right hand with your own sword." A few years later, Rome would fall for good. While many generals sought fame through quick and spectacular victories, Corbulo built his reputation on something much rarer: patience. During Nero's reign, he was sent to the east to settle an explosive conflict. The contest for the throne of Parthian controlled Armenia. A misstep could mean open war against a powerful empire. Corbulo, however, did not act in a hurry. First, he reorganized the army, restored discipline to the demoralized troops, and strengthened the borders. Only then did he begin his offensive. In 58 AD, he took Artaxata, the capital of Armenia, and the following year conquered Tigranocerta. But his greatest victory was not on the battlefield, but in diplomacy. He negotiated an agreement in which Rome chose the Armenian king, but he would be symbolically invested by the Parthian monarch, a brilliant balance that avoided a catastrophic war. The East gained peace, Rome expanded its influence, and Corbulo showed that the most effective force is the one that knows when to fight and when to negotiate. Despite its victories and the peace it brought to the East, Corbulo did not escape the fate of so many Roman generals. His prestige aroused the paranoia of Nero, who feared any man too admired by the legions. In 67 AD, he was ordered to take his own life. Without hesitation, Corbulo obeyed, dying in silence like a disciplined soldier to the end. His death was unjust, but his legacy showed that patience and diplomacy could be weapons as powerful as the gladius. While his name was erased, another commander was already leaving his mark in battles in the east, Lucius Lacius Lucullus, known simply as Lucullus. Unlike Corbulo, he faced a formidable foe, King Mithridates VI of Pontus, one of the most cunning and persistent adversaries Rome had ever faced. With limited resources, Lucullus showed the world that intelligence and resilience could bend even the most determined kingdoms. In the 1st century BC, Rome waged a brutal war against Mithridates VI, king of Pontus, master of the resistance and feared strategist. It was in this scenario that Lucius Lysius Lucullus appeared, sent to the east with scarce resources and disadvantaged troops. Even so, Lucullus did not back down. He besieged nearly impenetrable fortresses, won battles in enemy territory, and pushed Mithridates into present-day Armenia, forcing him to retreat again and again. But Lucullus was not only a warrior, he was also an exemplary administrator. In the reconquered provinces, he reduced tax abuses, reorganized local management, and won the respect of the populations. This, however, aroused the envy of the Roman elite. Unjustly accused of prolonging the war for personal interests, he was replaced. His victories were eventually attributed to Pompey, and his military memory overshadowed by the brilliance of Julius Caesar. Retired from public life, Lucullus was marked only by his fame for lavish banquets, and his name became synonymous with excess. A hero turned into a caricature. During the Second Punic War, when most Roman generals feared facing Hannibal, Marcus Claudius Marcellus emerged, nicknamed the Sword of Rome. Unlike Fabio Maximo, the shield who gained time with containment tactics, Marcello went on the attack. His most legendary feat was the siege of Syracuse, a very rich city and one of the best fortified in the ancient world, which still had the ingenious defenses of Archimedes. For 2 years, incendiary mirrors, catapults and cranes kept the Romans at bay. But Marcello persisted. He reorganized his troops, kept up the pressure, and finally took Syracuse in 212 BC. Tragically, in the chaos of the invasion, Archimedes was killed, despite Marcellus's express command to spare him. Proof that even the conqueror respected the genius of the sage. His career looked promising, but in 208 BC, he fell into an ambush and was killed. Rome lost one of its most daring generals, remembered for a time as the blade that cut through the Carthaginian terror. Long before Caesar or Augustus shone in Hispania, one commander was already fighting fierce tribes such as the Lusitanians and Celtiberians, Lucius Pompey Strabo. He did not seek glory in grand triumphs, but secured hard-fought victories in hostile territories, where every valley and every grove were natural strongholds of the enemies. Strabo combined ruthless military campaigns with the construction of fortifications, roads, and colonies that would pave the way for Romanization. He understood that winning in Hispania was not just defeating warriors, but consolidating culture and presence. However, as he was not part of Rome's political elite, he did not receive triumphal arches or statues. His work was invisible, although each stone in Hispanic cities carries his legacy. Like him, many other generals who saved Rome were condemned to oblivion. But today, as we rescue their stories, we give them what Rome did not give: memory. Because the empire was not built only by those who wore laurel, wreaths, but by those who bled on the borders, sustaining the greatness of Rome, even without ever being remembered. Rome immortalized emperors and senators in marble, but forgot those who actually kept it standing when everything around it crumbled. Belisarius, Aetius, Corbulo, Lucullus, Marcellus, Strabo, men who did not seek glory, but carried the weight of an entire empire on their shoulders. They didn't have statues, but they had courage. They were not remembered by chroniclers, but they engraved their names in eternity through deeds that changed the fate of the world. And today, you have become a witness to this forgotten truth. If these stories moved you, give your like right now and subscribe to the channel. This will help keep alive the memory of the heroes Rome tried to erase and ensure that more people discover hidden secrets of history. The past only lives on when it is told, and you are part of that mission. Like, share, and subscribe. Because together, let's give a voice to those who Rome tried to silence.